welcome to another episode of Johnsequitur. You know, if I got this stupid thing on, then we're probably talking about football. And you know, if I'm talking about football, probably shouldn't be a football fan if you're watching this. We're talking about the cinematic aspect of football, and also the part that's boring. I know that we've covered how the sport can be both conservative and progressive at the same time. To go over that briefly again, the sport will present changes each year and also present commentators who are against those changes, so the game can grow while also appealing to people who don't like it growing. That is how a sport that is only played between the months of September and January can be talked about in July ad nauseum. Now I go into work and I get coffee, and while I'm standing in line getting coffee on the TV on a Tuesday morning, there are two people on ESPN screaming at each other at the same time, and I can make out bits and pieces of what they're saying. The basic thing is that they're arguing about which quarterback is what, and this is every week. Now I want to remind everybody of something. In football, at any given play, there are 22 people on the field. One of those 22 people is a quarterback. Literally everyone else on the field does something else. The big fat guys that don't get any recognition, like Big Bam Bumbleton or Freddie Truckman Jarvis, those guys, they're out there, and the only time that they ever get any recognition is when they hold somebody. And then it, like, closes in on them to, like, embarrass and shame them for being fat. You big, dumb, fat guy who couldn't stand in front of the other fat guy, so you had to grab him. You dummy. That penalty's worse than waiting way the fuck too long to make a play happen. At least I think. It's 10 yards to hold, right? And it's 5 yards to just stand there for longer than 40 seconds. Which is another point that I would like to bring up. Football is the most boring fucking sport on the planet. I thought golf was boring. It is, I guess, but at least with golf, when they're showing golf, it's consistently people hitting the ball. Football is a lot of guys just running into piles of other humans and then 40 seconds between the next thing that happened. There's also breaks for, you know, when people break their legs or arms or whatever, but if they're fat guys, it doesn't really matter. It just goes to commercial and then you see them being carted off. I like football in a cinematic sense. What I mean is like these right here. What we're looking at right now is NFL highlights, and I think some of the greatest things about football are these things, at least the old ones. When I would watch like Super Bowl 25, which I'm going to reference about 300 times in this video, those highlights are better than some movies. But you know how the Giants won that Super Bowl? They won it by controlling the clock. Controlling the clock means that you take as long as you can between each play, and each play is a 1-yard run right up the middle into a pile of people. Now, you get 48 hours a week off. Of the total hours there are in a week, 48 of them are designated for you to do whatever you want with. The weekend. 3 of those 48 hours, and sometimes 6 if you're a rabid fan, which if you're a Steeler fan you watch 3, because the rest of the league doesn't exist, and you are the greatest moral superiority of all football teams. We might get into that if I can control my ADHD in this video. Let's just say real quick that the Steelers fan base is hypocritical and terrible. You're taking 3 hours out of your week each week. Sometimes more because of Thursday night football. You're taking that time to see approximately 5 or 6 plays that you'll enjoy watching, and that's about it. Couple interceptions, maybe a deep pass or two that actually lands, maybe somebody breaks a run, but for the most part, lots of short passes, lots of people running into the middle. You know what the most annoying thing about football is? If you can manage to pull off like a really long play, like, I don't know, somebody rips off like a 30-yard run, without hesitation, I can tell you, no questions asked, exactly what the next play is going to be. This is the running back, this is the defense. Bloop. Bloop, bloop. It's a coach's favorite play. I don't get it, and I don't know why people think it's entertaining. Think about it for a second. Imagine being a Jaguars fan. Are there any? I actually know one. So yes, there is one Jaguar fan in the world. Imagine being that, though. Like, imagine that. Like, imagine taking 3 hours out of every week to watch your 1-8 team go 1-9 again in this perpetual motion of just year after year being terrible. Or being a Jets fan, for fuck's sake. They do have a Super Bowl in, like, the 60s, when football was, you know, not even real. Starting to question if anything was real before 1982. Alright, since most of the people who watch this are from around here, think back to Super Bowl 40. What do you remember? I remember two things. Actually, I remember a lot because I have Rain Man brain when it comes to sports, and I'd really rather not. The two things that you probably remember are Willie Parker running 75 yards. You know how long that play took? Like 11 seconds. And then the reverse pass where Randall L. threw it to Hines Ward, I think. That play took like 10, so there's 21 seconds. Name another thing that happened in that game. That is the penultimate game of that season. That game meant that that team would be remembered. Who did they beat in the AFC Championship game? Who did the Seahawks beat? If you remember that they played the Seahawks. Who did they beat in the NFC Championship game? Gotta look it up. I guess you got the internet, you can do that. I know the answers to that. It was the Broncos and the Panthers, or the Broncos and the Cardinals. I think it was the Panthers, but it may have been the Cardinals. I don't really remember because it was 2005. But I shouldn't remember anything from then that has to do with sports, because sports doesn't matter. My point is that in an NFL season, each team plays 16, and I think it's now 17 games, then playoffs, and then they play one game at the end of the year. That game defines the entire season. Nothing that has happened up to that point matters. Why are we watching the Jets at 3-8 play against the Vikings? Perpetual losers. They went to 4 Super Bowls, lost all of them, and then they keep kicking field goals wide in the playoffs, like throughout their entire history. I could pick on the Falcons, but they do that to themselves. So the Jets and the Vikings, it's Thursday night, and you are taking time out of your life, not even on a regular football day, but on a Thursday, to watch these two teams who can't even play the game properly run into each other for 3 hours. I don't know, man. It's not very entertaining to me. And now I'm going to do something that I know that you hate and get political. But before I get political, let me ask you something. What is political? I'll tell you what is political in my brain. Policies. Where the budget is being spent. That's it. When at the beginning I said that the game is played conservatively and also progressively, those two words make you go, politics! No! What I mean is, conservative being you keep the old ways, progressive meaning that you make new rules that further the game, enhance it if you will. Well, there's the concussion thing, which is, after finding out that concussions were causing NFL players to die at early ages and messing up their brains permanently because, you know, they're doing this with their heads all the time, and nobody pays attention to that because, ooh, the cute quarterback threw a pass, and he is the whole team, and nothing matters but this one player, and when the team fails, it's because their quarterback is bad. Oh, since this is Johnsequitur, yeah, we're going on a rant here. There are 32 quarterbacks in the world of professional sports. Not college, we're talking about professional sports. There are only 32 people at a time that can throw a ball. The scale of good and bad is pretty fucked good. Aaron Rodgers with his 1 Super Bowl appearance. Tom Brady, who's like 50. Oh gee, that's it, isn't it? Anybody else who throws 5 interceptions because the receivers run outs when they're supposed to be running posts, they're terrible quarterbacks. And therefore, the whole team is terrible. Colin Kaepernick. You know I'm talking about Colin Kaepernick, right? Colin Kaepernick had one of the highest QBRs, quarterback ratings, in the entire league in his last year. He played on a team that had 4 or 5 defensive starters retire at the beginning of the year. Some of them from these very concussion things we're going to be talking about in a second. He also lost some of his offensive starters. Despite that, he had a very high quarterback rating. Man, sit down during song! No one would let him in the league anymore. And that's exactly what it was about, and there's no debating that. Tim Tebow wasn't allowed to play because he threw weird. Instead of throwing like this, his arm went weird, and people would spend weeks and weeks talking about this. Like, he kept winning, but they kept being like, well, his arm move's weird. We can't have that. If he wins with his arm moving weird, then anybody can do anything. And if anybody can do anything, then this sport might change, and I can't because my whole life is falling apart around me and my wife doesn't love me anymore! Probably because you throw fits like that over a fucking sport, you fucking... God damn it. Anyway, the concussion thing. Yeah. People were finding out that these athletes were getting concussions and dying. And Junior Seau, a former linebacker for the San Diego Chargers, he shot himself but made sure to keep his brain intact so they could study what made him the way that he was. There was also that player from the Steelers that drove down the road really fast and wrecked his car and died. They finally decided to start doing tests once players had retired to see if they qualified for money, compensation, for their brain problems. And then it was found out that the tests were racist. There's a certain score you have to get on these cognition tests, but it's written in that if you're white, meaning that your skin is a different pigmentation on top of the human body that you have, then you can score better and still get the money. Whereas if you're black, meaning your skin's pigmentation is different over top of your human body, then obviously that has something to do with whether or not your brain works a certain way, and you have to get an even lower score to qualify. Racism, if you will. Because IQ, as we all know, is a way to justify racism. It's not real. So yeah, there's that, and now there's lawsuits, but I'm sure the NFL is just like, that didn't happen. Hey, look at these emails! One guy is racist! Ooh! The fact that it took them that long to turn the Washington Redacted into the Washington Redacted, that should say all you need to know about the NFL. The Chiefs still exist, so there's that. In Texas, it's more important that you can throw a football, not even catch one, run one, or be the fat guy standing in front of everybody so that the handsome guy can get laid on Saturday nights, than you can do education. It's like that in a lot of states, actually. Jameis Winston raped a woman when he was in college, when he was in Florida State. When the woman went to the police and asked them to check into it, they told her, this is a football town. You really want to do that? Last weekend, Jameis Winston tore his ACL. He throws more interceptions than he does touchdowns and yet keeps playing. Good.